Hello, Governor. This is Away Games, a Chicago Cubs and baseball podcast hosted by two comedians who I can't do this anymore. We are from Chicago. We live in New York now. We love the Cubs. We watch them in London. We loved some of that. I'm Adam Mamawala here with Kevin McCaffrey. As always, we're both in the same city for once, but won't be soon, as is usually the case. How you
Yeah,
doing?
I'm okay. It did sound like we had a separate show announcer there for a minute. It sounded like, someone else was, that was our version of, I don't know, I guess Higgins on Fallon, or, it was Alan Coulter on Letterman, our British friend to do the little intros. That would be nice to have someone do the intros
It
so
would.
we don't have to worry about the bullshit up top. But yeah, do you ever get that way when you're somewhere? Do you ever have the accent sort of filter into you quickly? Because I was thinking that too. Like Adam
Thousand
watched
percent.
two
Yeah.
London baseball games and he's stuck like this now. Uh,
Anytime I'm in the Midwest, especially
mhm.
around my Wisconsin family, I hear someone asks me an affirmative, and I'm like, "Oh yeah," and I'm like, "Oh, I don't talk that way." Uh, India is bad. The only time I've been to India, I was a kid, and my parents had to like pull me aside at some point and be like, "I don't know that you noticed this, but you're doing like the accent."
Which to me is like, it's a fine line, right? Because when you're speaking a foreign language, you're supposed to do the accent.
Right.
But to me, that sounds, I think that's why I suck at doing a French accent, even though I kind of speak French, where I just like, I feel like I'm making fun of you. I can't do it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
1000%.
So I wonder which Cub had the best British accent, sort of melting into the society over there. I wouldn't even have a guess now. I feel like Rizzo back in the day, Schwarber, I think would have given it a
Well,
shot.
they did a little clip where they showed some of them attempting a British accent, and Haps was pretty good, which doesn't surprise me. I feel like he's he knows what he's
he
doing.
he golfs and drinks wine. He's worldly,
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah, it's obviously it felt like, I think, coming through that London series, the Cubs were on the precipice of genuine momentum with that 4-0 lead immediately in game two, and they had momentum. They won 10-12, I think, or almost won
Yeah.
10-12. I think it was, they would have, that would have been 10-12. It's been a good run, but it is amazing how much losing that game changes the vibe from like, oh, we back baby, to like, oh
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think, and by the way, follow us at Away Games Pod for all sorts of fun stuff. We were tweeting during the London games. I believe you pitched the idea of having British announcers, which I would rather have announcers who don't speak English than I would rather have no announcers than have Michael Kay and A-Rod. It was the worst broadcast I've ever heard.
Michael K. and A-Rod was so bad, and I feel bad almost saying that, not because I disagree with it, but because it feels like such a pervasive opinion that it feels like someone
Hmm.
must be wrong here. It can't possibly, but no. It's sort of like when people talk about how good Shohei Ohtani is, who just struck out 10 and hit 2 homers in a game against the White Sox yesterday.
Jesus.
It's sort of like, yeah, we know he's good, but it's impossible to articulate how good he is. Like, he cannot possibly be overrated
Yeah.
with language that humans are equipped with now. And by the same measure, I think we cannot accurately get how bad Michael K and A-Rod are together, fine in general, but also for a Cubs Cardinals game. Who, I mean, they just, unsurprisingly, they just talked about the Yankees a bunch. Like, this
They
is,
talked about basketball. They talked about cricket. They had Tim Kirkjian's incredibly grating, annoying voice on that broadcast for just an inordinate amount of time, doing his same like his whole bit is like, I'm short and unathletic, and I'm talking to A-Rod. Like the whole thing is just him out doing like man on the street. Like, have you ever heard of Tim Kirkjian? He's very tall and handsome. Ha 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 ha.
it's a pretty good Kirkjian. It is, and I do like Kirkjian more, I think, but that voice is exact. Yes, the short joke, we got it, folks. We're good. We're good on the short joke. Also, you're on television, so you can't tell that you're short.
Right.
Like, it's a weird joke when the camera, it's not like the cameras are one size fits all and Kirkjian's having to like jump when he talks to get it in on the camera. That's not how it works. That's how, like, that's one of the main things when people who know me from the True TV show I was on, when they come out and see me do stand up at clubs, frequently they're like, oh, you're taller than I thought. Just because, and I'm not a giant.
Because you were
I'm like,
sitting.
yeah, exactly. And it's because I look like I was the same size as Danny Bonaducci because we were on camera together, or we were on the same screen at different times. And he can actually, in reality, fit in my pocket, So it's like, it's one of those things. But yeah, the broadcasting was so horrendous.
I would say, if I had to sum it up, I would say that Michael Kay and A-Rod are as bad at broadcasting as Nick Madrigal is at hitting home runs.
Yes, but he's been good at hitting lately.
It's true,
Generally,
yeah.
OPS and over 400 since he came back, hitting over 300. I mean, he has to do those things to be usable. But yes, Nick Madrigal, Michael
Well,
K.
yeah.
One pronunciation guide. Like I didn't even know that could be a tough one.
Well, in the top of the ninth, Nick Madrigal hit a screaming double off the wall, and that was right after Adbert Alzoli had pitched for half an inning. So it was really he said it like that. Did you hear how he pronounced Alzoli?
Yeah, yeah, it missed it. There's like several ways you could get it wrong in an understandable
we
way.
get Alzolay. Like I do see how you might think that if you didn't see the name, but also, isn't part of your job preparing? Is that not part of the job of being a broadcaster?
It's just not that many names, too, because you just automatically know so many. There's only going to be like I don't know. If you don't follow baseball at all, there's maybe going to be, let's say, 12 question marks of names where you're like, I guess I don't exactly know exactly how to say this. But when I was my senior year after I just stopped playing sports for brain reasons, and I worked as the PA guy for the baseball team because I was friends with those dudes, and I would just ask. I would go to the other coach before the game and just go down the lineup and be like, hey, do we, is this? And that's all you have to do. And you had a bunch of fucking hours on a plane to just get a pronunciation thing right. So, my God, can't believe how bad they were. And on the previous day during Pride Month, we get John Smoltz, who hates baseball and is talking about things that are factually untrue. And I say during Pride Month because my favorite John Smoltz fun fact is when gay marriage was coming through, he's gay marriage. What's next? Marrying animals, and just. John Smoltz, go fuck a turtle, as I said on.
Well, they are once they're on their backs, they have a hard time flipping back over. So
I mean, this is probably info you would get from John Smoltz. What a piece of trash! So it was. I mean, Joe Davis, I think, was the other broadcaster who is good, but what a fucking nightmare otherwise, broadcaster wise, across the board.
Yeah, very upsetting. I also think Michael Kay is arrogant enough that there very well might have been a producer in his ear after the first time being like, "Hey, it's Madrigal," and he's like, "No, it's Madrigal."
I'm going straight vibes off this. I think I'm going to tell him how it should be. Yeah, it was no fun. Also having A-Rod just absolutely fully halfway up the ass of Rob Manfred. Like seriously, like going out of his way to praise Rob Manfred. I heard at least 4 times and probably more than that right after the debacle with Oakland and stuff. It's just like and there was a British broadcast. I don't know if people heard, but there was like a British broadcast that other people got where the call of the Dansby Swanson homer, I think, was the clip that was going around, and it sounded great. It was fantastic.
Well, and wouldn't like just for it to be experiential. Like, yes, we're aware that it's in London. They do a lot of stuff about the teams being there, but like, I personally would at least like that as an option. Like, I want to feel like it's something different than a usual baseball game that I'm watching.
Yeah. Or how about send a Cub and a Cardinal broadcaster over there instead of the Yankee cast for a Cubs Cardinals game too. But yeah, I would have much preferred having their announcers go. And Arlo White is a top soccer announcer. He's done a bunch of Premier League stuff. I think he's done some Champions League stuff. He's a huge Cubs fan, and he did the 7th inning stretch once and called an inning of baseball in the booth with the Cubs guys because he grew up weirdly as a Cubs fan because he did one visit with his grandparents to Chicago as a kid and saw a Cubs game and fell in love. We've got better ideas than they do. So, yeah. But baseball wise, what's your final takeaway from that series?
My final takeaway is that if you had asked me that after the first inning of the second game, I would have been on cloud 9. I think ultimately, like, as much as it's easy to pile on Mancini and rightfully so, I think you had the correct take at Away Games Pod on Twitter, which was like, you can only be so mad at people for being put in positions that they shouldn't be put in.
Mhm.
In this case, literally, like Trey Mancini should not be playing first base for any team in professional baseball. Arguably, any team in minor league baseball. Like he's just not at a point in his career where that is a prudent choice. Now, it would have been one thing if Bellinger truly were unavailable, but it's
Mhm.
clear that he wasn't because he came into the game. And who knows? Maybe they get out of that inning on Sunday, and Stroman still has the blisters that he's dealing with, and they still get knocked around and end up losing the game. But I have never, not since like old school Cubs playoff games where you could just feel like the life go out of the stadium on like a fucking James Loney grand slam. Like not since those types of vibes have you just felt there be a complete momentum shift that quickly, where Mancini drops the ball, the Cardinals get a single to get into within 4-3, and you just felt it. Like even with the Cubs up one, it did not feel like they were going to win that game, and they didn't, and now they've lost pretty badly last night because Jamison Taillon just it's frankly really bad. I don't know how else to say it at this point, and it's very frustrating to have been that close to getting all the way back to 500 after being 26 and 36, I believe, like 2 weeks ago, to get all
Yeah.
that way back, be right there, and then now we're back to 3 games under 500. It's just frustrating.
Now it feels like to get back to 500, it would take one of those vaunted 3-game winning streaks that the Cubs
Right.
avoided for so long. So yeah, it does feel like it's amazing how much how much the record can swing with a game, even though there are
Mm-hmm.
so many games. Everything's it's a 2-game swing like that, and as you say, with Jamison Tyone coming back here, and he's had some time off. The Cubs did the thing where not only did they have a couple days off on either side of this Cubs Cardinal series in London, but they also shifted Stroman and Steele up, so the other pitchers got
Mm-hmm.
a lot more rest. And you would hope that this would be a thing if there was ever a time to sort of have Tyone get back online with what he's been every other year of his career would have been then. And it seems like no. It seems like he and Hayden Wesneski sort of both have this similar deal where lefties just see everything off them
Yeah.
right now. And it is a little concerning that we can't fix that very specific problem with these guys. And I guess Wesneski had that issue anyway. It seems like he was dealing with that when he came over from the Yankees. But Tyone, who was also with the Yankees last year, did not really have this issue. He gave up a decent amount of homers, but it's just a different pitcher than we've seen before. So that's rough, especially as we see Stroman with the blister issues he came out with. Also on that Mancini play, he gave some Carlos Zambrano vibes briefly, which I do understand, but he
Yeah.
turned the back to Mancini and then looked up and screamed. And it's like, I mean, I get it because it's visceral, it's in the moment,
Sure.
but
Yeah, and I don't think Stroman is the sort of guy who like goes out of his way to show up teammates, but it is frustrating if you've
me
made
neither.
your pitch, you feel like you should be out of the inning, and then you're not. That was something I always used to annoy me about Peyton Manning, was like if somebody ever dropped a good pass, he would just like very clearly be upset with them for all the cameras to see, which I don't necessarily think is being a great teammate, but like
Yeah.
if you do make the play, if you do what you're supposed to, and the other half of that equation does not, and this is not new. We talked about last week on the podcast a similar play where Mancini, in his own words, like let it speed up on him, and almost had Mark Leiter coming out of the game with one arm. I
Yeah.
like
Yes.
it was kind
This
of a
is
similar play where he just like couldn't decide. In that case, it was he fielded the ball, took one step towards first, and then was like, "Oh wait, no, let me throw it instead." And then in the case of Sunday, it's a ball that, like, first of all, you have to know where your second baseman is playing. And I say this understanding that I'm far from a major league player, but like as someone who plays first base in softball, and I've been doing this for years, it is a decision you have to make instantaneously of like, I feel how far that is to my right. I need to cover first base rather than try to field it and flip it to whoever's covering.
yeah.
And that wasn't even like an in-betweener. That's you have to go to first on that.
And I think some of this is if you were going to make the decision to put Mancini, whose athleticism we see where it's at right now, he just can't run, he can't really move much. He's it's like anytime you see him moving, it's like when a freight train starts, a little bit, where it's like,
Yeah.
I guess it'll get going, but it's going to take a
Right.
minute. It's creaking. I think if you're going to make the decision to keep running him out there, which again, this isn't second guessing, we've been talking about how he's unplayable at first. like recently. I think I've heard other podcasts do it for weeks now. I've seen it written about. This isn't like
Yeah.
new news. This isn't hindsight being 2020. This is foresight's 2020 in this case. And you just have to coach him to look, you don't get anything to your right. Like we've got Nico Horner. We have a shortstop playing second base. So he's going to get to a lot.
Right.
We need you to not even be replacement level there, because I think the ceiling is you slightly below replacement level, but we can't we just need you to not make these catastrophes. So you balls hit, if it's not directly at your ass, you go to first. And also Trey Mancini talking about it, obviously he said, he felt like the loss was on him. He let the team down, all this stuff. And what you were referring to is I was tweeting about, like, I can't get mad at Mancini because he is trying. I only get mad at players when it is a failure because of a lack of effort or a lack of care or awareness. And I guess you could say there's a lack of awareness there, but I think it was more just indecision of a guy being in a position, where he's not comfortable right now. He's not really physically able, it seems. And I can't get mad at him about that. This is, it just sucks when, we don't want to keep beating this drum, but when the Cubs' main issues right now are their first base run production it was, I believe, the worst in baseball last year. It's worse this year than it was even last year with the Schwindel Rivas situation over at first. The Hosmer, Mervis, Mancini, and Mancini's been the best offensively out of those.
Hosmervicini, if you will.
Hosmervicini, yes. You could get that with a little Alfredo sauce. Yeah, not bad. But, just how many problems would Anthony Rizzo just plug up if he was still around? But, ship has sailed. It's just frustrating when the Cubs are 20 points worse of WRC plus against righties than they are against lefties, and they have a black hole at first base and no defense over there. And we had one player who could have fixed all that, and oh well.
But I do give Mancini a lot of credit for owning up to his mistakes. I just guessed it on Sarah Sanchez's pod, and I referred to him as Mancini. I think it was very Mensch-like behavior to take the blame in the way that he did. And that's the thing, right? Like I think if you're a good team, even if you have a brutal lot, we just saw it in the College World Series. LSU got absolutely fucking smoked in Game 2. I think they lost 24-4. And a lot of teams might have rolled over, but they came out and they beat the shit out of Florida in Game 3. And the point is, if you are a good team, if you're a resilient team, you're going to have bad losses. It's a long season. There are going to be frustrating things that come up. You have to bounce back. And just because they lost yesterday doesn't mean that they're going to go on a skid as we record this on Wednesday morning. But what I'm saying is, in a different universe in which Mancini makes that play, or he's not even out there, and the Cubs win that second game, just think of like the vibes on that flight home from London versus what they probably were. And I do think that makes a difference. Like, I have no doubt that these guys are exhausted. I'm sure it was fun, but like Ian Happ was talking about this on the compound, like it's not a vacation for them. They go over there and they have a bunch of media obligations. They're maybe doing some sightseeing, but it's all very regimented. You're there for a few days. You have to go do your warm-ups at the stadium. You play the games. So now they come back. The last thing I want to see is for them to come back. I think they have 13 straight before the All-Star break. If they all of a sudden go 3-10 before the All-Star break, it's like we're right back to where we were 3 weeks ago, and now we're looking at selling off again. And it felt so close to actually having that forward momentum to be like, yeah, this is a team that could and should be at the top of this division.
Yeah, and I mean, with how hard the Cardinals have fallen off, and again, there's just it's just amazing the no pitching they have over there. Yeah. I mean, watching Steven Matz, who was their big signing last year, come out of the bullpen, I was like, God, yeah, they signed Matz, and he failed so bad so far that he's not even in their rotation right now is crazy. Honestly, that may be where we're heading with Taillon at this point, because I don't know what else you do with him, but the problem with the Cubs starting pitching at the moment, which has been overall good, is just if Taillon is unplayable, which basically he's been just an automatic loss, in there as one of your 5 spots, and If Stroman's going to miss maybe a start or two, so the blister with Stroman, Stroman himself said he thought he'd be ready for his next start. He's dealt with this issue once before, and I think he said last time he missed 2 starts. He missed one or
Yeah,
2 starts, which, that's not the end of the world, but that is, I mean, that's a big difference when the
especially when you have
rotation
no off days.
when you have no off days and when the rotation is shortening up in this way where Taillon doesn't
Mhm.
really count. I mean, Wisniewski, like we said, he's not the pitcher we saw. He's not having the success he did last year. And even in the minors, Ben Brown, who was tearing it up in Double
Yeah,
A, who was doing all that, he's had 2 really bad starts in Iowa his last 2 times out. There's just no one really there knocking on that
right.
door for that spot. So it
And that
was
also presumes everybody else's health, right? Like if
exactly.
anything happens to Steele or Hendricks or Smiley, then we're really in trouble. Honestly, Wisniewski's season, it reminds me a little bit of the pitching version of Ian Happ's 2017 season, where it's like
Hmm.
he had a great spring training, everybody's really high on him, comes out and just doesn't have it. And obviously Wisniewski's been back and forth between the minors this year. I don't know that the Cubs have the option, not literally, but I don't know if they have the ability to send him to the minors because they just need the arms right now. But
Yeah.
yeah, you can't, because it's also too much pressure to put on the dogs of your rotation to expect to win every time. Like that's also not going to happen. And credit to Justin Steele, and I'm sure you felt the same way as people who've seen this guy develop and have been following him for some time. Like you go out and see him just absolutely dealing in front of 55,000 people doing his patented Justin Steele celebration, which I have to say, very Lester like. I don't say that lightly, but like literally the way he celebrates reminds me of John Lester, and I
I
love it.
mean, Wilson Contreras said it on Justin Steele's Instagram. Wilson
Oh,
Contreras, evil Wilson, quote commented mini Lester,
yeah,
like earlier this season under there. So other people make that comment too. And
yeah.
Steele also that last inning, getting out of the jam and getting out of it with a strikeout. I think obviously he did the sort of like almost. Sort of a Hulk Hogan move a little bit, where he
Yeah,
sort of like punched the fists in, make an omega, as you yell at you on the way
yeah.
off. He also did a mini version of that yell on the previous pitch that was a check swing that he thought he got him on, and they said no. So he did like he was like, yeah,
Oh,
got him.
he was just practicing a celebration.
Exactly. It was great. But yes, Steele, who also missed a start with a forearm issue, Kyle Hendricks, who's sitting there with like I think a 2.6-ish ERA at
Yeah.
this point coming back, but he missed a whole year. It's just asking a lot when you're getting like from Steele and Hendricks and Stroman to this point, you're getting like 95th percentile
Hmm.
projections and up from all 3 of those guys, and Smiley's pretty close to that too. And it's just things are getting thin quickly
Right.
in that rotation, as you say, especially with 13 games remaining before the All-Star break. And in those 13 games, I mean, we've got Philadelphia, who's playing pretty good, right?
Hmm.
Lately, and then
And I believe we have Nola tonight to
Nola
see him
tonight.
face him.
Okay, he's good. But we've got Philadelphia. We've got Cleveland, I
Hmm.
believe, who's been
Yeah.
middling. The offense hasn't been good, but their pitching's always decent. And then the Yankees, right?
No,
No,
Brewers at the
Brewers. That's
Brewers,
right.
and
Yes,
then the
yes.
Yankees, and that's a huge one because right now the Brewers and Reds are kind of bouncing back and forth between first place. The Cubs are hanging around like three and a half behind them, but much like the Pirates series a few weeks ago, and then the subsequent Pirates series on the road, like whatever happens in the next 5 games, next week will be a chance for the Cubs to make up some ground against the Brewers. Is it correct that the Cubs have not played the Brewers since the opening series of the year?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's so weird.
It is weird, and I don't love the. I mean, there's a fun element to getting to play every team in the majors the way it's going this year, where you have like
Yeah.
where you have a series with everybody, but that the sort of more balanced schedule this way, I guess. You just don't see the teams in your division as much, and I do miss that. I miss that
Mhm.
from an emotional standpoint. I like hating those teams. I think
Yeah.
I was thinking about how much I was enjoying the Reds the other day and how much I was like, the Pirates, they're doing good. And I'm like, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't feel
Yeah.
nice about these teams. I like fucking hating the Reds. Imagining Tom Brenneman somewhere saying enough already. I don't want to like them, and I think the fact that we're playing our division rivals
Yeah.
less is making me letting general baseball fan affection creep in. Not for the
Mhm.
Cardinals, and also not for the Brewers, but um, Yeah, it is bizarre to have not played the Brewers since the first series to
No,
win.
yeah, Sarah and I were talking about it when I guested on that pod yesterday, which is like the Reds are really likable. Like it's hard
Big time.
even as a Cubs fan not to like them. I would love nothing more than to see a division that the Cubs win and the Reds like finish second and get a wild card, which let's be honest, I don't know that any wild cards are coming out of this division, but
I
like
don't think so, yeah.
give me like Cubs, Reds, Pirates, Brewers, Cardinals every year for the rest of time.
Yeah.
I would love that.
That's a nice order for now. Yeah. Talking about the first base issue. So obviously Bellinger has been playing over there a decent amount, and with Tauchman, that's been a good way to get Tauchman in. But the Cubs also called up Jared Young, who
Yeah.
is if you don't know him, he was up for a brief period of time last year. He was bizarrely sent down. He came up. He made his major league debut last year. And he was sent down with one game left in the season. Like, just let the guy hang out,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
for the
yeah, yeah.
last day. But he went back to Iowa and hit a walk-off homer in the one game remaining, I think. But Jared Young is up. He was the Cubs minor league hitter of the year like several years ago. I want to say
Yeah.
maybe it might have been like 2019 or something. But he's 27 years old now. He's a first baseman slash like corner outfielder, I guess. One of those guys who's like you'd rather not play him anywhere but the batter's box. But
Right.
he's been crushing the ball. He is a left-handed hitter, so in terms of helping the Cubs against right-handed pitching, I think we have to start seeing. I mean, we should see Jared Young starting at first tonight. I think against Aaron
Mhm.
Nola, and he's gonna be interesting. I think he is obviously he's 27. He just got his first taste of Major League Ball last year, but this is a guy with an offensive track record in the minors. You can. It's a big wish but you could dream on like a couple Schwindelian months maybe from a guy like this, like it's a
It would be
similar.
great.
Yeah. So
Now, is the plan in that scenario that Young is a first baseman who starts against righties, Bellinger starts against, or who starts? Yeah, I mean,
so I
what's the
think he
plan there?
starts
Because
he starts at first against righties if Bellinger is in center. I think is what it'll likely end up
and
being.
that pushes Talkman back to being a fourth outfielder, which is what he is meant to be anyway.
Yeah, and I mean in that case it also might be like Jared Young he could DH also if they wanted to put Bellinger at first and Tauchman in center and keep them all that
Yeah.
way. I mean you could also be giving against righties. You could be giving Seiya Suzuki an occasional day off that way
Mhm.
too. Seiya sort of, he started chilly, got hot, and then he's been a little chillier again, which is just how guys roll. Also, I saw like several comments in a row under Bleacher Nation, I believe was referencing a Suzuki at bat. Several comments in a row saying he's just Fukudome. Just you might not be racist, but you are stupid
Mhm.
with a brain that can only match like
Right.
people who are from the same country to
How is
each
your
other.
best comp someone who doesn't even hit the same handedness?
Not the same handedness. They're Japanese fellas who play right field. Okay,
Yeah.
congratulations. One is right-handed, one is left-handed in the batter's box. Also completely different hitters.
Mhm.
Like Suzuki, much more power. Fukudome on base machine. These are not similar dudes. Also, Fukudome was genuinely very good defensively, whereas Suzuki is more, he's been better this year, but I think maybe a little bit inflated reputation. But just don't
Yeah.
you don't just compare Japanese guys to Japanese guys. Like it's goofy.
Yeah.
So
But the good thing about Suzuki is that despite his recent struggles, when you look at the advanced stats, like he is hitting the ball hard. He's hitting into a lot of bad luck, and
right.
he's well above average in a lot of categories that bode well for how things are going to go long term. So I'm not overly worried about Suzuki. Now
Me neither.
the real story with Jared Young that you've buried the lead here is that apparently David Ross has paid his debt to Miles Mastrobuoni.
Yes.
Mastrobuoni has agreed to delete and destroy the photos that he secretly took of David Ross doing something nefarious that he had
Hmm.
been hanging over his head to blackmail him into staying on the big league club. I wish the best to Mr. Mastrobuoni, but it had become untenable.
Yeah, he's a guy who, I mean, we're saying the same thing in an optimistic way about Jared Young, but Mastroboni is a guy who he's crushed AAA pitching. I mean, so did Matt Mervis, and I still have hope for Mervis, but it is You got to see him do it at the major league level, and Mastrobuoni has had a pretty large amount of major league time for what the results have been this season, I think. So yes, Mastrobuoni was the corresponding move to go down to AAA to allow Jared Young onto the roster. Also, for the 40-man roster shuffling, Brandon Hughes went to the 60-man DL. He had knee surgery, so we're not going to see any more of him this year. It doesn't look like. Also,
Yeah.
there was just like I think on our last podcast we talked about like, is anyone? Why aren't we saying what's up with Codi Heuer? There was
Yeah.
this one brief. It was in one day while the Cubs were in London. There was like during a game, the news dropped.
Hmm.
It was like if you were trying to bury news at any point, this is I
Right.
guess how you would do it. Bunch of
They
injuries.
released the Codi Heuer news as the Ocean Gate press conference was happening.
Yes, exactly. Codi Heuer, look, he threw the ball bad once and he got in a submersible, and it is unfortunate, but he has a fractured arm. His arm fucking broke, dude. So he's gone for a bit. Brennen Davis, who his power completely disappeared, and then he disappeared, and no one was hearing anything. He had core muscle surgery. It sounds like
Yeah.
is so he's going to be out. They say 6 to 8 weeks, as we know with the
Man.
Cubs. I don't know. That's what 10 to 12. So Brennen Davis surgery, Brendan Hughes surgery out for the year. Codi Heuer fractured arm. I mean, that's you got to assume that's out for the year too. It's all
There's
bad.
no way you could watch that pitch and think anything other than this guy's not going to be pitching for at least a year.
No, my first thought was Tom Browning, which is, I mean, that's just the freaks we are. Because what I was like 8 years old, I think, when Tom Browning had like a similar thing and fucked his arm
Did
up.
Tom
But
Browning break his arm, or what
yeah,
happened to him?
it was like one pitch and he just like collapsed and his arm was like, ugh. Yeah, just like a bizarre pitching injury that you almost never see. And
The
yeah,
Brennen Davis situation is particularly upsetting, and it's also a very good reminder of why gambling on a bunch of prospects never pays off, or doesn't always pay off, I should say.
yeah.
I very much hope I'm wrong, and the guy's young, but like at this point, I think of what we expected or where we expected Brennen Davis to be. I don't know, a year or two ago, if we had been talking about him at that time, and to see what he's had to deal with in terms of injuries, and also just like seemingly losing certain tools that he had before. It's very strange, and I hope that that doesn't end up being a story of a guy who was highly touted and then like never even gets to the big leagues because he just can't stay healthy. And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a yick, yeah, because this is not clearly not the story of a guy who's not putting in the work, which there's
yeah.
prospects like that, right? Like Braylon Marquez is a guy who was
Mhm.
the tops of the Cubs prospect list a couple of years ago and is a left-handed 6'4" pitcher who can throw 100. There's not a lot of those in the world. And it just seems like, I mean, it just seems like that guy never wanted to do the work and the Cubs ran out of ideas. I think he's still in the organization, but that does not seem to be the case with Brennen Davis. He's just had a bunch of weird, terrible injuries. And for a little bit of hope, I would say that as the power, which was sort of his calling card, disappeared this year. Hopefully, that's related to the back issues last year, the core surgery this year. Hopefully, gets him on the road to something better. But he did actually cut his strikeouts way down, add the
Mhm.
walks way up. So hopefully, I mean, that shows an adjustment in a positive way that maybe he added that tool. If he can come back. But I think to show how far he's fallen, he was a top 25 prospect in baseball. And our friend Greg Huss over at Northside Bound, he just, who guested our podcast a couple weeks ago, he released his Cubs prospects list and he has Brennen Davis. I think he had him 14th in the Cubs system at this point,
Yeah.
and that's not because the Cubs system is like a top 5 system in baseball. It's still not. It's very deep. But this is why this is why it is very difficult to count on even top end prospects.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, Brendan Davis is still only 23 years old. Like there's
Yeah.
still time for him to get this right. And maybe he'll be somebody who doesn't come up and produce until he's 26. And if he ultimately does, and it's for the Cubs, then great. In happier prospect news, I'm sure you saw this, but two Cub prospects are headed to Seattle for the Futures game. Did you see that
I
announcement?
didn't see it yet, actually. Tell me
All
some
right, breaking
prospect
news.
news,
Well,
Adam.
one of them you already know for sure. Who do you think the obvious one is?
Hollywood Pete, PCA.
Hollywood Pete, PCA. The other one, what's your best guess? It's also somebody who's been with the Smokies.
Also, I mean, Ben Brown was crushing it with the Smokies. Is it not Ben Brown?
It is not. It is B.J. Murray. B.J.
BJ Murray.
Murray Jr. Yeah.
Wow. I
hmm
that's great for him. That is a surprise to me. BJ Murray Jr. is I mean it seems like he's a corner infield, maybe corner outfield guy, but I've seen him listed at like third and first a lot, but
Yeah.
he's jacked. He's a jacked dude and his offensive numbers have been great this year.
Yeah, there's in the article that I'm looking at, it's saying that although Murray hasn't nailed down a defensive position with the Smokies at Double A this year, his excellent plate discipline has kept him an everyday starter in 2023 in 65 games. He's slashing 258, 376, 446 with 7 home runs and a 126 WRC plus. So not like astonishing numbers by any
Right.
stretch of the imagination. I don't know enough about him and also the other prospects in the futures game to know if that's a surprise or not that he's invited. PCA was like that. It would have been shocking if he hadn't been.
Yeah, MLB Pipeline, I think, just released their updated prospect rankings, and PCA was 10th. Was so now officially the Cubs are back into the top 10 prospect by that measurement, at least by the for the first time since God, I don't know the last top 10 consensus prospect the Cubs had in the system. It might have been in the golden years, you know.
Yeah. What do
So
we think with PCA in terms of like, is there any shot that we see him as a call up later this year? Do we see him next year?
I think there's definitely a shot he gets in towards the end of this year. I could see it. I'm not expecting it. I think we're seeing some calls from some people on Twitter, and some of these people were also people who were like saying Brennen Davis should be on the opening day roster last year. So I mean, this is a little bit of slow your roll, everybody.
hmm
I think because it's one of those things where the difference between the number one overall prospect in baseball and Ellie De La Cruz and PCA at
Yeah, he's
10.
good.
Yeah, like that difference is bigger than the difference between like the 10th overall and the 70th. I think, just
hmm
elite, it's the bell curve thing. It's so I'm saying that I really expect PCA to be a really good player at the major league level, but I expect him to be in the conversation to be on the roster really like it should be early next year. It should yeah,
hmm
maybe very early, maybe right at the beginning next year. But I think a cup of coffee at the end of the year is all I would
Yeah.
is the most I would expect from PCA.
I mean, I hope he doesn't get called up this year because to me that correlates with the Cubs being competitive towards the end of the year. I think there's a better chance of him getting some time or getting called up if the Cubs are out of it and looking for some reason to
Yeah.
have people come to Wrigley.
Well, and he's in Double A as we speak.
Right.
And you can jump to Double A. I mean, Miguel Amaya made the jump from Double A
Nico?
up to the majors too. Uh, I guess this is a thing where Nico was a college, had played high level college ball for 3 years. PCA did not. He came straight out of high school and also missed a year with an injury,
hmm
and also was that 2020 draft. So it was, he's missed more development time. And Amaya had just been around a long time and had gotten a lot of at bats, just like had been injured. So I think PCA's got to get to Iowa. I think not, even though
Yeah.
not everyone does, I think he's got to get to Iowa before he gets to the major leagues. But that is exciting. And BJ Murray is a weird pick for the futures game because the stats you read off, that means he's fallen off lately because he started way hotter than that
Yeah,
too.
they said he's been slumping in July or in June.
Yeah. But good for him. That's a cool thing for BJ Murray, who is also on, I believe he was on the United Kingdom's team for the World Baseball Classic too,
Oh,
via some
very
like
nice.
ancestor situation. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, what else you got?
Not too much. Nothing that we need to talk about right now. I think we've covered a decent amount for this week, and yeah, this is after the really hot run. I think this is an interesting. What are we for real week?
Right. Well, we've played this repeating game of do we think the Cubs will get back to or above 500 at some point? And I think you've been, or maybe we've both been as optimistic as we can be. But I tell you what, if they don't, we're gonna look back on this stretch and be like, man, they were right there, and then they kind of let the wheels fall off again. So
Yeah.
I do agree. I think that how the next I guess 12 games go before the All-Star break is going to go a long way in determining who this team is. And honestly, like they're 3 games under right now, 12 games left. I want to dream bigger, but if there's a scenario in which they can win, what would that be? I don't know. If they could go 8-4 in the next 12 and go into the All-Star break a game over 500, I think you'd be thrilled with that, especially given the opponents that they're playing. So
definitely, you would. I would cash that in a heartbeat. So
I'll take a 7-5. I'll take a 7-5. I'm not picky.
But even like 2 weeks ago, I think we were giving percentages for getting back to 500. I think I said 30% at the time.
Yeah.
I think is what I said. And now, I mean, I think they just should at this point. So will they? We'll see. But like, they should. I think that's about the talent level of this team. Is 500.
I'm going to at least 2 of the 3 Yankees Cubs games next weekend, maybe all 3. We'll see. I have tickets right now to the Friday and Sunday. I think it's going to be if the Cubs win on Friday, I'll probably go Saturday.
Right.
If not, I'm going to need a breather.
I think you should take care of you. Let's do that this season emotionally. Follow us at Away Games Pod. Thanks for listening. If you haven't, and if you're enjoying yourself, hey, give it a rating and a review. Why don't you? Tell a friend. And go listen to Sarah Sanchez's podcast as well. Hear your boy Adam talk to someone besides me for once. How about that?